There's no denying it. She possessed a voice that was truly legendary. Dubbed the queen of cool, smooth, and soulful vibes, her presence was unforgettable. But behind the shimmering lights, the stylish mystique, and the unforgettable anthem Smooth Operator, lies a story that took a surprising turn, a journey few fans ever saw coming. In many ways, I've always felt like a bit of an outsider, she once reflected. I couldn't possibly represent glamour if I didn't even enjoy sequins and that sort of thing. Sade, the enigmatic and captivating singer who once dominated both charts and hearts, seemed to vanish from the limelight just as effortlessly as she had stepped into it. "You can't be afraid to step away," she said. "A lot of people fear that if they disappear, even briefly, everything will collapse." So, what truly happened to the woman who came to symbolize a generation's elegance and emotional resonance? Strap in. Her story is far more heartbreaking and complex than you might have imagined. A soulful revolution. Across the pond, Britain isn't the first place that springs to mind when one thinks of soul music. But something unexpected unfolded in the 1980s. A wave of British artists started deeply embracing that classic soul aesthetic. You had artists like Phil Collins paying tribute to the Supremes, and bands like Soft Cell and Dexy's Midnight Runners digging into vintage R&B. All around, slick, polished bands like Spandau Ballet, ABC, and even Roxy Music brought a kind of pop-soul fusion to the forefront. And then came Sade, bringing a whole different energy. It was authentic, it was raw, and it was real. Their debut album Diamond Life wasn't just a hit, it became a cultural staple. It captured the essence of the 80s for many, smooth, sensual, and unforgettable. Tracks like Your Love Is King, When Am I Going to Make a Living, and The Sweetest Taboo weren't just songs, they were experiences, a whole vibe that defined late-night moods and tender slow dances. Who was the woman behind the name? That raises the question. Who exactly was the band Sade? And more importantly, who was the woman behind it all? The tale begins with Helen Folasade Adu, born in Ibadan, Nigeria in 1959. After her parents parted ways, her life took a dramatic turn. At just 4 years old, she relocated with her mother to the quiet suburbs of southeast England. She spent her formative years in Clacton-on-Sea, Essex, a sleepy coastal town, worlds away from the glamour she would one day embody. "I was born in Nigeria, in a place called Ibadan," she once shared. Her mother worked as a nurse, not exactly a DJ spinning vinyl at home. So young Sade found her musical inspiration through pirate radio, particularly Radio Caroline. That's where she discovered soul icons like Donny Hathaway, Bill Withers, Gil Scott-Heron, Ray Charles, and Nina Simone. Artists who bled emotion and soul into every note. By the late 70s, opportunity in Clacton was scarce. So, Sade made a bold move to London, enrolling at St. Martin's College of Art to study fashion. After graduation, she experimented with menswear design and did some part-time modeling. But things took an unexpected turn when she started frequenting the city's vibrant club scene. Her look stood out, slick ponytails, form-fitting black outfits, bold red lipstick, and the now iconic gold hoop earrings. Even before she ever sang professionally, her style alone commanded attention. That magnetic aura eventually landed her a spot with a funk group called Pride, and just like that, her music career began almost by accident. A rejection, a revelation, and the rise of a star. "Most people don't realize that the band actually turned me down at first," Sade once admitted. "It wasn't that I'd never failed before, but everything I had genuinely wanted up to that point, I'd achieved." Ironically, Pride didn't leap at the chance to make Sade their front woman. When they couldn't find another vocalist, they finally agreed to bring her on as a background singer. Wild, right? From 1981 to 1982, Pride, a 7-piece funk ensemble, hustled across London and the south of England, performing in hopes of getting discovered. Meanwhile, Sade was quietly crafting her own path. She began collaborating on songs with saxophonist Stuart Matthewman, a northern soul enthusiast from Hull, who instantly connected with her musical sensibility. The duo started doing stripped-back sets on the side, supporting Pride with minimalist performances that were worlds apart from the band's high-energy funk shows. Imagine dim lighting, sultry vocals, smooth saxophone lines. It was atmospheric and deeply soulful. One of their standout moments was a mellow cover of Julie London's Cry Me a River, which left audiences speechless. People started to notice, and not just for the music. Sade had an undeniable it factor. Something big was definitely brewing. Among the tracks she and Matthewman performed was an early version of Smooth Operator, a song that would soon change everything. As buzz built around their haunting performances, attention began to shift away from Pride toward Sade and her crew. By early 1983, Pride collapsed, and Sade made her move. She joined forces with the real talent, Stuart Matthewman, keyboardist Andrew Hale, and bassist Paul Spencer Denman, to form a brand new group. They kept it simple and bold. The name, Sade, after the woman who was now the voice, the face, and the soul of the entire project. Musically, they were all aligned. Their foundation was classic soul, those warm, vulnerable, emotionally raw records they adored. But they also embraced imperfection. The singers Sade admired weren't robotic or pitch-perfect. They sang as if they had lived every line they delivered. That raw authenticity was what made their sound unique. "We were all crazy about classic soul records," guitarist Andrew Hale once said. "But we also loved the flaws in them. The singers Sade admired didn't sing like machines. You heard their life in their voices. They also had a bit of a punk ethos. That do-it-yourself, anti-establishment energy was part of what fueled them, just as much as the lush soul textures." As interest in the group swelled, record labels began circling. But there was one problem. They didn't have a professional demo, and they were flat broke. Studio time was out of reach. That's when they approached Robin Miller, producer and owner of Power Plant Studios, with a bold ask. Could they use his studio during off hours? Thankfully, he said yes. Together, they recorded a simple 2-track demo featuring Smooth Operator and Your Love is King. Those 2 songs would go on to become genre-defining classics, timeless testaments to the unique soul that only Sade could deliver. But here's the twist. The record labels hated it. When the band's manager took their demo tapes to various companies, they were met with rejection across the board. The response was discouraging. The tracks were deemed too long, too jazzy. Marr recalled them saying, "Don't you get it? Everything's about electronic drums now. Think Tears for Fears, Depeche Mode." It was a tough pill to swallow, especially since the demos had received incredible reactions from everyone who heard them in the studio. But since the industry wasn't biting, the group decided to change tactics. They'd build their own buzz. They had one huge advantage: Sade's growing clout in the fashion scene. Thanks to her effortlessly cool persona in London's cultural circles, she had major names like journalist Robert Elms and fashion icon Jean-Paul Gaultier in her corner. That kind of backing isn't nothing. They went full throttle with cultivating a strong, stylish image. Then it happened. Sade landed the cover of The Face, the ultimate trend-setting magazine at the time. It was a major moment. "They turned me down," Sade once said, and then came crawling back when they had no better options. Suddenly, they weren't just a band. They were the band. To seal their rise, they staged a high-profile showcase at Heaven nightclub, one of London's most buzzed-about venues. The room was packed. Every big name in music journalism showed up. It was bold, polished, and precisely the kind of strategic self-promotion labels typically handle after an artist's already broken through. But Sade and her team, they did it all independently. The line snaked out the door, over 1,000 people queued to get in. Suddenly, the same labels that dismissed them were tripping over themselves to sign her. "They were desperate," said Robin Miller, their producer. "We were about to sign. We just didn't know who with. 3 or 4 major labels were after us." By October 1983, the tides had fully turned. Sade herself signed a deal with Epic Records, and by year's end, the rest of the crew, Stuart Matthewman, Andrew Hale, and Paul Spencer Denman, had officially joined her under the same banner. The industry had finally caught on to what the streets already knew. Sade was destined for greatness. With the ink dry on the Epic contract, the band returned to Power Plant Studios, where it all began. this time to create their debut album with Miller leading the charge. And this is where the signature Sade sound truly emerged. That smooth, stripped-down, effortlessly cool vibe wasn't just a stylistic choice. It was a reflection of who they were. They weren't aiming to be virtuosic or flashy. Their minimalism came from a desire to keep things intentional and authentic, to give every note room to breathe, every word space to land. Ironically, their lack of formal musical training played to their advantage. There was no risk of overproducing or adding unnecessary fluff. Their sound was pure emotion, raw and sincere. That recording session wasn't just about finishing an album. It was about finding their identity. As Stuart Matthewman put it, the songs ended up really simple and stripped back. That's because none of us were great musicians, but together, it worked. Sade had a stunning voice, but she wasn't classically trained. Stuart admitted, "I could get a nice sound on my sax, but I never studied jazz." Andrew played simple chords. Paul was a straightforward bassist. If any of us had been even 10 or 20% more skilled, it would have been a mess. What made our music special was that we were young, naive, and didn't overthink it. And at the center of it all, that unforgettable voice. Sade's voice wasn't loud or dramatic like her soul heroes, but that's what made it magical. It was understated, smooth, and hauntingly intimate. She didn't need to shout to make an impact. Each phrase felt weighted, each note dripped with meaning. Her voice didn't just sing, it lingered. It was sensual without flash, emotional without melodrama. She had that rare ability to convey volumes with restraint. When she sang, you didn't just hear it, you felt it. She also wrote the bulk of the music herself, often recording melodies into a handheld tape recorder. Then, the band would bring those raw ideas to life. Stuart explained, "Sade has a great ear. She writes all the lyrics and hums out the melodies. When she's focused, she doesn't stop. Me, Andrew, Paul, or whoever just lays down the chords. But she never gets credit for being a songwriter." Complementing the band's minimalist approach were Miller's arrangements. The now iconic Latin-inspired bongos heard throughout, that was his touch. As a producer, Miller was aligned with the band's vision. He was inspired by classic Atlantic soul but gave it a distinctly British twist. "We don't sit down and say, 'Let's create a sound,'" Miller said. "It just happens naturally. Our music is pop because it's accessible. All the songs I've loved, even the jazzy ones, tell a story. That's what I want our songs to do. Take you somewhere, make you feel something." The crown jewel of the album is its opening track, Smooth Operator, co-written with former Pride bandmate Raymond St. John. The lyrics, used as the album's title, invent a seductive narrative about a jet-setting, smooth-talking playboy who Sade knows is trouble but still can't resist. It starts with a spoken-word intro, reminiscent of Gil Scott-Heron, but instead of righteous fury, Sade channels a kind of sultry aloofness. Andrew Hale's gentle keys and Paul Denman's laid-back bass conjure the mood of a moonlit Mediterranean stroll. Even Stuart Matthewman's sax flourishes are subtly woven in. No one's showing off. And that's the point. It's cool, effortless, and deeply atmospheric. Sade's songs often reflected her life, or the experiences of those close to her. Many revolved around matters of the heart. Your Love is King is a glowing expression of love at its most openly passionate. The follow-up single, When Am I Going to Make a Living, tackled the anxieties of survival and ambition. Their take on Money's Too Tight, to mention, originally by the Valentine Brothers, was born from personal struggle. It was a reflection of Sade's own challenges, especially the financial strain of squatting in a disused fire station. She once recalled, "Back in the Pride days, I remember walking from Turnpike Lane Tube. The rain was pouring, I was completely drenched, miserable, and frustrated. I pulled out a pen and began writing 'When am I going to make a living' on a soggy envelope. I only got halfway through before the pen stopped working." That song eventually became something of an anthem. When Diamond Life finally hit the shelves, its brilliance was undeniable, but the British music press failed to grasp its depth. Part of the misinterpretation came from the album's sleek, stylish cover featuring Sade in all her glamorous elegance. They misread Smooth Operator as a yuppie power ballad, an anthem for young, upwardly mobile professionals chasing money, glass tower dreams, and non-stop soirees. They pegged the music as the ideal soundtrack for 1980s stockbrokers and coke-fueled deal-makers, absorbed in the buy low, sell high culture. But that depiction couldn't have been further from reality. Sade's sound was soulful and rich with emotional depth, not an ode to wealth, but something far more intimate. Despite this, the stereotypes stuck around for years. Every new release was met with the same shallow assumptions. Epic Records saw Sade and her band as an album band, a sentiment they shared. But when their debut single Your Love Is King soared to number 6 on the UK charts, landing them a spot on top of the pops during a time dominated by synth pop, it was clear they stood apart. Clad in all black, barely cracking a smile, they looked like outsiders from another era. As Paul Denman put it in 2020, groups like Simply Red and Prefab Sprout were dubbed sophisti-pop, polished post-punk for 80s yuppies. They even labeled us corporate jazz. That scares me, because if we were trying to be a jazz band, we'd definitely be doing it better than we are now. In the hard-nosed, Thatcher-era 1980s, the UK press championed gritty, working-class authenticity. Sade didn't quite fit that mold, despite having lived through genuine hardship. They projected poise and polish, what the media took as wealth. And so, the press remained skeptical. Being Nigerian, even though I've always lived in England, I felt the climate right away the second I got off the plane. It found me, Sade once joked. But in truth, the British class system doesn't take kindly to those who don't fit neatly within its lines, no matter their origins. Their third single, Smooth Operator, a cheeky takedown of a jet-setting ladies' man, was mistaken by many as a celebration of exotic glamour. Its breezy Latin rhythms and wine bar ambiance only fueled this false narrative. Meanwhile, Sade grew tired of the interview circuit. Journalists seemed far more interested in her appearance, wardrobe, or love life than in her artistry. She often felt misrepresented. It was like those tape recorders they used would scramble everything I said, like a blender, she explained. There's this weird mindset that if something appears simple, it must be hiding something strange. Following Diamond Life's success, Sade largely withdrew from the UK press spotlight. Interviews became rare, and in that silence, tabloids filled the gaps with fiction. Fabricated stories about her secretly having a baby, or impulsively purchasing Fulham Football Club. Across the Atlantic, however, things were playing out differently. Unlike the UK's eclectic BBC-style radio format, US stations were heavily genre-segmented. Aware of this, Sade and her team knew that dropping Smooth Operator first in America could backfire. It might skyrocket up the pop charts, but also burn out quickly, especially with black audiences who held long-term sway. So they went with strategy. Instead of leading with the polished Smooth Operator, they released Hang On To Your Love as their debut US single in November 1984. Its funkier rhythm made it a better fit for black radio stations, allowing them to build grassroots credibility before making a pop crossover. Spoiler alert, it was the right move. By 1985, they were owning the year. At the Brit Awards, Diamond Life snagged the award for Best British Album, while Smooth Operator earned a nomination for Best Single, though it lost to the chaotic synth explosion of Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Relax. Still, while the UK press clung to their jaded narratives, America was falling hard for Sade. In the States, they weren't just accepted, they were celebrated. Smooth Operator broke into the Billboard Hot 100's top 5 and dominated the adult contemporary charts, boosted by frequent airplay on the newly launched VH1, which catered to a more mature, cool adult audience. Ironically, though the UK had given birth to Diamond Life, it was the US that ensured its legacy. The album went triple platinum in Britain by the end of 1985, but wouldn't reach the same milestone in America until a decade later in 1995. Still, recognition was swift and powerful. They won the Grammy for Best New Artist in 1985, and were the only female-fronted band to perform at the UK leg of Live Aid, a defining cultural moment. Sade proved that staying out of the spotlight could be just as powerful as constant exposure. Less truly was more, especially when the music resonated so deeply. And the influence? Undeniable. Artists across genres, From metal figures like Mike Patton and Deftones, to R&B legends like Frank Ocean, D'Angelo, Alicia Keys, The Weeknd, and Beyoncé have all cited Sade as a key influence. That smooth, smoky, emotionally rich essence, you hear it everywhere now.